talk to you about our new National Public Library Strategy. And this is actually something we're extremely proud of here, because one of the reasons why I wanted to come and work in Ireland in 2019 is because Ireland is one of the few countries in Europe or even the world that actually has a fully national, joined-up strategy for its public libraries. I don't know if anybody in the room comes from a country that has a national public library strategy. I know you will all have your strategies for your regions or for your library itself. But here in Ireland, we are joined up, and we have a single library management system, a single LMS, and this makes us actually relatively unique, and it's quite exciting from a library strategy perspective, because it means you can do things with the whole country involved. You're not trying to get that authority to join in. It's a really nice sort of system. So our previous strategy ran from 2017 to 2022, which meant that during 2022 we began preparing our new strategy. And those of you who've worked on strategies know that it takes a long time. You've got to do consultation. I'm going to talk you through everything that we did. If you have questions, just ask them during my presentation, okay? Because you might have something in your head that goes out of your head in 20 minutes' time. So we'll have a very open, very informal sort of thing. And when Paul, my big boss, earlier on spoke, he mentioned that we've called the presentation "The Library is the Place." And I really, really like that, because I think the trends in librarianship over the last 10 or 15 years that you would have seen has been about the library as the community hub, and about the place in the community where people go. And we thought we could be very short and very succinct. The library is the place. And I think it works on a number of different levels. And what we want to do with our strategy is to get more people to come into the library in a physical sense, but of course these days the place is also digital. The place is online, the place is virtual. So how do we get people to come? And we hope our strategy is going to address that. Our subtitles are three of the main topics that came out of our consultation. Libraries are about information access. They're about recreation. And this was a really strong thing that came through from the members of our public. Sometimes, and I know this because this is my area of work, we think a lot about all the new services that libraries can offer. All of our digital services, 3D printers, new technology, and that's all wonderful. And it's all super important. But actually, at the heart of many people's experience in the library is the ability to engage in leisure, in reading for pleasure, in engaging in recreational pursuits. And of course, the library is such a wonderful place to do that because it's free to everybody. And you can do that regardless of your ability to pay. And very much connected to that is the third piece that we got in our consultation, which is the library is an inspiring place. It's where you come to access ideas and go on to do something more interesting with them. So we're really happy with the way that we framed all of this. This is the part of the meeting where you're going to be able to ask me anything you want about Irish libraries. For me, how many people have been to Ireland before? Hands up. 1, 2, there was a gentleman at the back who said he's been. 3, I remember. 4, and have you been to our libraries before? No. Okay, so you're going to get an opportunity to see our libraries here. And obviously, we're going to have some things in common with your libraries, but we're going to have a big difference in others. So what you can see here is kind of an overview of how our sector is structured. So Ireland has 330 public libraries, which is quite nice. It's quite a manageable number. A very similar country to us in terms of population is Finland. Finland is generally one of the best library countries in the world. We use them very much as an inspiration. They have more libraries than us, so it's kind of interesting to me to think about management there. But we have 330. You'll be familiar now with what Ireland looks like. Those 330 libraries are a real mixture. Obviously, we have our big urban centres in Dublin, in Cork, in Limerick, in Galway. But you can see from the red dots that a lot of our libraries are going to be quite rural. In some cases, they're going to be quite remote. And particularly if you move over to the west of Ireland, you'll begin to start seeing libraries there on our islands. So all of these locations have very specific challenges, and one of those challenges in the last sort of 5 to 10 years has been getting the internet into every single location, which is something that we now have. But you know, if I was giving this presentation 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been the same. Our previous strategy connected every single library to the internet, and now we have this national network. We have 23 mobile libraries serving places. You mentioned earlier on, one of those would have been coming to your community. And in a country like Ireland, the mobile library is still super, super important. The importance of being able to go to our rural areas, it never goes away. You need to be able to reach those people. And whilst we're lucky enough to have some funding from government to replenish our buildings and occasionally to build a new library, we're never going to turn that 330 into 660, right? The mobiles are crucial. But of course, as you probably know, mobiles these days come with internet access, they come with technology, but we're trying to turn our mobile fleet green, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Across the whole country, we have about 1,600 staff. So that is everybody from the people on the front desk, who may not be professional librarians, to the qualified professional librarians and the managers. And these 330 libraries are across 30 municipal or local authorities. You heard Paul earlier on talking about the local authorities. Maybe you missed a little bit of context. In a kind of administrative sense, Ireland has 31 counties, and they have local authorities in each of those 31. In a library sense, 2 of those authorities have merged. This is very specific now, you're not going to be tested on this. But we have 30 library authorities, because Galway County and Galway City is just one library authority. And that means for me, the most important people in my job, my key stakeholders, are the 30 city and county librarians. So you will have an equivalent in your country of the kind of the library manager who will oversee 20 branches, 15 branches, in a kind of designated administrative district. So the city and county librarians are my most important stakeholders, because I have to build relationships with them, work with them to implement this strategy. We have, as of last year, just under 15% of the population as library members. We would like more, but this is pretty good. It's not too bad. We always want more, and we've been slowly increasing it. COVID, as I'm sure everybody experienced, made a real hit in the numbers, but we're coming back. And that means we have about 15% of the population who are registered to use our libraries. But I'm sure those of you who do statistics in libraries know the ones we want are the active members. Yeah. So it's not just enough to be a member, we want you in there using stuff. And there we've also seen our active members going up. And a very interesting thing for us to consider in our ADELE context is we're finding now that we have users of our library service who may never step foot in our library, which I think is a really interesting conundrum for us to deal with. We never see these people's faces, they never see our faces, they never step through our doors, but they're our users. How do we find out what they want? How do we understand their motivations? How do we get them through the doors eventually? Because I do firmly believe that we have a physical library, a community space. We do want people to be experiencing that. But of course we can't ignore these digital-only users, so we need to provide services that they need. We tend to get around about 17 million visits a year. So one of the things we always used to say when I worked in UK public libraries is that more people will go to a public library on Saturday than they will go to a football match. I think that's always quite an interesting thing, because people don't tend to think about it in that way. That number of visits means a huge number of people in the country are engaging with their library, more than many other sporting things which may have a higher public profile. Libraries are still very popular in Ireland and people use them. And then I mentioned just this kind of wonderful characteristic of the Irish public library system. Every single one of these red dots is on the same library management system. So you're not having to have staff in one area and they get a job in another authority, they have to learn something new. Everyone is on our system. It's called Spiders, it's provided by Civica. And my team here in the LGMA, we run the national tender for that system, and we run the national tender for our online resources. So we're able to use those economies of scale on behalf of the 30 local authorities, and we provide this one system. So this is really good for the staff, but it's really good for users. It means when you go into the library here in Dublin, and you go on the catalogue, you can order a book in the north from Donegal, and it will be delivered to your library in Dublin. It means you can then take the book with you, go on holiday down to Cork, and drop the book off at the library in Cork, and it will find its way back to Dublin. So it's pretty much exactly the same as what you would have in your own countries, but as is national. And we're really quite proud of this because we have a national distribution service, and it's become extremely popular with our users, as you can well imagine. The catalogue is the national catalogue when you go into the library, and it means you can get access to that. And that doesn't happen everywhere in the world at all. So we're very pleased with that. And likewise with our e-books and our e-audio books, you go in through one single provider, and you have access to all of the online resources and e-magazines and newspapers and learning courses, all through one place. We are in a part of the government, now this is kind of interesting, it will be different in all of your countries. Generally, my experience in European libraries, because I also work with an organisation called NAPOL, I don't know if any of you have heard of NAPOL, but it's the National Authorities on Public Libraries in Europe, and it's 25 different versions of me coming together to talk about what's happening. We do have members from all of your countries in NAPOL, I think. And I find there that my colleagues are in the Department of Culture, for example. That's where libraries are located. Here in Ireland, we're in a different department. We're in the Department of Rural and Community Development. And this is kind of interesting for us. We were previously in the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government. And prior to my time, my colleagues told me that we used to be in the same part of that department as the people in charge of the graveyards. So when you had a management meeting, you'd have the librarians and the managers of the grave diggers come together. And I think that may have been the wrong place. So in the Department of Rural and Community Development, it's a smaller government department, but we're a bigger fish. So this is something interesting which we found. I'm able to contact my government representatives very, very easily. I'm not always having to chase a meeting. There's a short power distance between myself and the decision makers. We talked a little bit about the LGMA when Paul made his presentation, but you can imagine the LGMA, it deals with the chief executives of those 31 local authorities that I mentioned. So my key stakeholders are the county librarians, and then they will report to the chief executives. So the chief executives are the people that hold the purse strings, they're very important. So we're always trying to show just how valuable libraries are so we can continue to get funded at the local level. And this organisation, the building that you're in, the Local Government Management Agency, is where the City and County Managers Association also meets, and that's where the 31 chief executives come together. But with the library strategy, it's the LGMA, we're in charge of that. My team coordinated, you've met Alison, you've met Anne-Marie, altogether there's 9 of us, and we work on everything from our European projects to the tenders for the library management system, the online resources, and then we do national programs around reading and literacy or health, and we do all sorts of things around emerging technologies and projects, and I'll get into that in the presentation further on. This is a little bit of a quick sort of summary of that with my team in yellow in the middle. I think another really great thing about the libraries in Ireland is whilst we report directly to the Department of Rural and Community Development, there is nothing to stop me going to the Department of Finance and saying, let's do a project together. Or the Department of Culture and saying, we want to work with you, have you got any money? There's no rules that prevent me from doing that. So I can build relationships with multiple different government departments. And in the United Kingdom, which is obviously another country I'm very, very familiar with, the libraries that do not have that flexibility, they have to go through the Department of Culture, Media and Sport to get permission to speak to the Department of Health. So this is why I love Ireland. I can basically build relationships, I can build conversations with people, and I can try and get funding from different government departments. It's the budget day today. We just heard that we haven't got funding for a programme that we wanted because it's gone elsewhere, but that programme is being funded by the Department of Children. So I'll be looking to try to rebuild that relationship as quickly as possible and get that money back. But it's a really good example of the flexibility that we have as libraries here in Ireland. I'm going to talk a little bit about these strategy committees and the city and county librarians, but that just gives you a little bit of an overview of our structure. So when it came to developing the new strategy, our strategies run for 5 years. And I think that's a good period of time for a library strategy. It's long enough for you to put in some actions which are going to take quite a few years to get going. It's long enough for you to identify some actions that may need you to spend 2 years getting the money for them, and then 3 years implementing. It means that our strategy launched in July this year, and we're going to have until the end of 2027 to implement it. And
Can I ask?
Yeah, please, absolutely.
I was curious about libraries have always been in a national network here in Ireland, or it started at some time?
So they haven't always been in a national network, no. There were sort of previously the different authorities would have had different library management systems. So I arrived in 2019, and I think the change to a national system happened around about 2017, maybe slightly earlier. Anne-Marie and my colleagues who are around will. Anne-Marie, when did we go national? 2017. Yeah. I got it right. So previously, and if you can imagine going from 30 to 1, I mean, that was a real, even now some people have the battle scars to sort of prove they were involved in that, because that involves training that 1,600 staff how to use the same system, how to forget what you've learned before, and I think we all know it's change management, it's a huge task. So no, definitely wasn't joined up before. And I've been doing some work with the UK libraries, particularly England, who would like to move to a similar situation, but they have 190 municipalities. So how do you do that? 30 manageable, 190 tough. So they're looking at maybe 4 different pieces. So when we're looking at the consultation for the strategy, we do take a very consultative approach here in Ireland. We did it for the previous strategy. We wouldn't just sit in a room downstairs and write the strategy and then present it. We did a big consultation exercise last year. We did a public consultation. We got nearly 3,000 public responses. A lot of this goes on kind of under the national sort of media radar, but 3,000 responses for a government strategy is huge. I think in some ways it may even be the largest number of public responses ever received for any government strategy. So we're quite proud of that, and the reason for that is that public libraries in Ireland are consistently rated as the #1 most valued public service in local authorities. So we're in quite a privileged position, but it means that we can, when I'm presenting the strategy to you, I can be like super confident that we've really been able to engage with our users and have included what they want in the strategy. But we did a bit more than that. We consulted with more than 300 members of staff, so that's a pretty decent percentage of the overall thing. We did stakeholder focus groups, we did surveys with stakeholders, we went to government departments, and we made sure that some of the senior stakeholders, including the county librarians and the directors of service, were involved. We also have a statutory requirement here in Ireland to work closely with Irish language groups. Who was it that said they could speak Irish and English? I forget something around here, but we do have a lot of emphasis in Ireland currently on boosting access to materials and resources in Ashgaga, so in Irish language. And for me as an English speaker, it's quite tricky to really get to grips with it. But we have a number of areas in the country which are Irish-speaking areas, so we have to provide materials for those. and increasingly we're providing more and more services. So we did specifically work with Irish language stakeholders. And a very interesting thing I think about the 2022 survey consultation that maybe you guys will have found as well, is that during COVID, we were able to use Teams, or Zoom as you may use it, much more effectively to reach our staff. So we have implemented a national workforce training program, which we do every month for our staff across the country on Teams. And there's now a familiarity on online meetings, which I'm sure you have experienced in your own countries as well, which means that these focus groups we were able to do all online. And previously, in the strategy before, the team went out to do 4 physical consultations in the country, which were really good and really valuable, but they never would have reached 300 people, and they never would have reached the hundreds of people that we were able to with the stakeholders workshops. So that's kind of a really interesting difference, the way that the world has changed and we're a bit more comfortable to be in those online environments. So we did all of this consultation. We had an external facilitator come in to help us move it forward. And then we basically developed the strategy, and it was pretty much finished by January, at which point it became quite political, and it went into the sort of overall national strategy, national government. We had to wait a little bit until the minister had a new library to open before we could launch it, so we had to sit there for a few months, basically waiting for a new library to be ready. But we launched it in July. So what did we get back from that consultation? Well, I've already started hinting at a little bit of this earlier on. What the customers, what our users wanted was for us to keep doing our core things. And I think this is kind of interesting. We're here to discuss the digital transformation. We're here to talk about the digital opportunities. And I'm a huge digital library man. That's where I come from in my PhD and all my research. But what we got back was a very clear message that libraries are about stories. They're about books, they're about reading. And I think this is something we always have to juggle, those of us who are interested in digital library services. We want to go forward, we want to do all the new stuff, we want to do all the really exciting stuff. And yet, we can't afford to kind of leave behind or forget about just the pure value of reading. So people wanted to see that very clearly in the strategy. They wanted us to keep doing the customer service that's got us to number 1 on the feedback pieces from the local authorities. They wanted the good buildings, they wanted the spaces. They wanted us to be louder about ourselves, which I think as librarians, quite frankly, we're pretty awful at. My whole career has been about library advocacy. That's what I did at IFLA, that's what I've done in all my jobs. I go to the UN and speak about libraries, I go to UNESCO and speak about libraries, I go to Brussels to the EU to speak about libraries. And I know how important it is for us to speak about libraries, and how important it is for us to be able to go to our politicians and speak about libraries. And there was definitely a feeling that our users felt we could be louder and more visible. So we have to take that on board, right? We have to do more. And it was a little bit of a shame because we did get some really good money to do a libraries communication campaign just when I started my job. And we developed a national campaign called Take a Closer Look. Brilliant, we shot an advert, it was in cinemas, it was wonderful. 2 weeks before COVID. So we had this wonderful campaign, it was really good, we were so proud, and then everything shut. So I've actually got all of this stuff and we're just trying to work out how to kind of put that back in. But we need to do more on communications and marketing. It was very clear that people wanted us to be involved in climate action, in sustainability, in green issues. And this is very much in keeping probably with trends in some of your countries, but certainly in Ireland, the kind of rising awareness of climate action, the ability of the library to be involved at that local level is a very crucial piece here. And then people wanted more access to their library. This comes through in every single consultation. It's no use having a great library if you work 9 to 5 and then you finish work and you come and the library's closed at 5:30. So we actually have in around 30 libraries across the country here in Ireland, which we will have more. We have something called My Open Library, which means the library is open at 8 AM to 10 AM with no staff. Your card will get you into the building, and then from say 5:30 till 10 PM so that there's nobody who can come and do your study and that sort of thing. It was quite a controversial thing to introduce. I understand why it was controversial, but it's been hugely successful where we have it, so we will continue to do that. And then here you can see the groups that we were asked to prioritise in the strategy. And I think these are important. I mean, these are groups that we do work with anyway, but you'll probably all be kind of familiar with the ages of library use. You use the library when you're a kid, when you're a child, then when you're a parent of a child, and then when you're an older person that's retired. And then you can you always use it all the way through, but those are three really big groups for us. And we know that teenagers come into the library to use our spaces for study, but maybe we could do more to actually engage them in some of the more interesting digital and other services that we have. And then likewise with older people, particularly older people in technology, basically is a phenomenon in Ireland which would be replicable elsewhere, which is that we've recently seen, for example, the banks leaving small villages and towns. All of your banking's on your phone, right? It's all online. But if you're a customer of a bank for 40 years and you're in your 60s and suddenly your local bank leaves your village, you have to learn how to do all of this again. And who's going to be there for you to do that? So, you know, there's sort of elements with older people, and also, again, like you would have found in COVID, when the library closed, we wanted people to use our e-books and our e-audio books. But of course, first of all, our older people had to learn how to use the app and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you have this same sort of situation in your countries. So there's a big role for us in exposing older people to technologies and helping them sort of understand how to really live in society. So I'll show you where that lives in the strategy. We talked about Irish language materials already. We also found during COVID that when, I guess some of you guys would have done the same thing, but we began to put events onto Zoom. So we started with things like book clubs, and by the end of the pandemic, we were doing workshops on local history and workshops on all sorts of subjects. And with the local studies piece, this is your local history. It's always been one of the most popular parts of the public library service. People love their family history, they love their local history. And we were finding that the workshops we did on Zoom, on Irish local history, Irish family history, people were coming from Buenos Aires or New York or the Irish diaspora all around the country, and they would turn up in a workshop. And previously, if you had a workshop on family history in Kildare, which I believe is where you're from, you would have to physically go to that library to participate in that workshop. But now, if you've got family connections in Kildare and you live in Donegal or you live in Boston, you can come to our events. And we realise there's a real opportunity here to look at the local studies piece in a digital sense. And we're really going to push that quite a lot in the new strategy. We also want to do something which I think is very relevant to the workshop we're having here, which is to place a lot more focus on designing new services in association with our users. Now, this is something Scandinavian colleagues have been quite far ahead of us on. Design thinking, user-centered design. And in the last couple of years, I've already led a pilot project with 10 of our authorities, basically learning new ways of designing services. It's quite funny as librarians, I think we're always very good at listening to our users and trying to understand what services they want. But sometimes we take those decisions on behalf of our users, and there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes it can be better to sit with a blank piece of paper with the older users in your community and say, what do you want that we're not giving you? And how can we design that together for the service? I think that for me is where design thinking is a really, really important future skill for librarians. So we're going to put a lot of effort into that in the new strategy. I mentioned the climate action. I'm pretty sure you'll be familiar, at least in passing, with the Sustainable Development Goals at this point. It's something I did a lot of work on with IFLA when I used to work with them. And our strategy is aligned to the SDGs. So in all of the targets, I'll show you the strategy in a moment, you can see which target relates to which Sustainable Development Goal. Now what that does is means that we can always go to central government here and say, we're helping you because all of our work helps you meet your obligations. in the Sustainable Development Goals. And I was lucky enough to go to present on this when Ireland had its review at the UN in July this year. We went across and we talked about what Irish libraries are doing for the SDGs. And we're the only country in the world ever had a full chapter on libraries in the Irish National Report, which is something IFLA wants every country to have. We talked about opening hours. We talked briefly about workforce development, but this project again is very much related to helping library staff understand how to transition to provision of digital services. And workforce development for us means that we are providing professional development activities for those 1,600 staff I mentioned. So it's going to be across lots of different subjects. But in bold at the bottom, the most important thing for our users, again, was that inspiration piece, the enjoyment piece, the engaging with libraries for stories, for recreation, for escapism. So this is the bit where I normally go a little bit off script, in that all of you will be familiar with strategies. Most strategies will have a vision and a mission. I've worked with tens of different library strategies, and to be honest with you, most of it involves rearranging these words in a different order every time. Okay? They're all great words, it's all really important, but there's only so many times you can rewrite what a library does. Nevertheless, it's still really important, and this is our vision is basically helping people in all communities across the country be informed, connected, literate individuals skilled for life. So you'll be familiar there with the themes, lifelong learning, connectivity, and that's our vision, with our mission basically being to provide universal access to information and resources to promote reading and enjoyment, and number one thing from our users, lifelong learning and life skills, education and cultural engagement. So these are good, I like them a lot, but as I'm a little bit cynical sometimes about these sorts of things, but they're there. The things I like a little bit more are the values. So this again came through from our consultation. These are the values that we want the Irish Public Library Service to have. We want to have quality and excellence. We want to facilitate civic participation, equality, inclusivity and diversity, hugely important, not least because very recently this year we've had a national campaign against our public libraries, organised by groups who do not want to see access to LGBTQ materials provided in our libraries. So for us, we're absolutely committed to the equality, inclusivity and diversity piece, and we can talk about that maybe at another point. It's still ongoing and it's a very real challenge for us. Connected to that very much is intellectual freedom. It's our job to protect and nurture intellectual freedom in the country. Trustworthiness and integrity, universal accessibility, and then that piece again on creativity, innovation and imagination. So I really like these. I like the vision and mission, but this is what I really like because I think these are the springboards. You bounce off these. This is what you make services in relation to. So we're going to get a little bit into the sort of the meat and the drink of the strategy now. We set the strategy up to have 3 themes, and I'm going to break them down for you here. Under each theme are 3 strategic objectives. Now, one of the really interesting things about doing a strategy in Ireland at the present time is if you work with a government department, they will tell you that you need to have tons of targets. And this was really quite difficult for us because some of the best library strategies I've seen can fit on one page. Okay, they're quite high level, but basically they're very succinct, and there is a lot of room for you to do sort of things against the strategic objectives. But our strategy is slightly different. It has the themes and then these objectives, and underneath each of these objectives, 1, 2, 3 there for example, we will have a number of actions. So the total number of actions in our strategy is 66, which is a lot, but compared to other government strategies recently, some of them I've seen with 120, 90, So I think we got off quite lightly in the end. But it does mean over 5 years we're going to be delivering 66 actions against 3 themes and 3 strategic objectives. So our first theme is focused on people, it's focused on our users. And this is where, number 1, as came through from the consultation, is all about reading and literacy. So what we want to see during the next 5 years is that each of those local authorities that I mentioned, the 30 local authorities, increases the amount of money they spend on books every year of the strategy. So very practical, right? It's a real tangible outcome we can measure. We want to see more materials available in Irish languages. We want everybody to have access to a book club that's suitable to them. We've actually worked with the national broadcaster here in Ireland on how many of you would be familiar with a British program called Gogglebox?
No.
I've got one person at the back. It's great, right? Gogglebox is great. Gogglebox is a really strange but really simple concept. It basically is a television program about people watching television. So 10 different interesting characters will watch television in their front room and they're being filmed. There's a camera in their TV, and every week they will all watch the same program, all of these 10 different families, and then you'll watch their reaction to the program. It sounds really, maybe it sounds stupid, but it's hilarious. Really funny. Because they might be watching a horror movie and you get to see 10 different reactions of this sort of thing. But here in Ireland we have something similar for books, which we started last year. So they've taken, I think it's 6 or 7 different book clubs. Each week they read the same book, and the television programme goes round the book clubs. And they choose interesting different books. One might be from a sports personality, and then there's an older ladies reading group reading about a sports personality. There might be a romance novel or a classic novel. But basically the book club has become a very, very big thing in Ireland. And it happened...
The same project.
Yeah?
For 15 years.
Oh, really?
With English library.
Okay.
My partners, and they organize this activity, the seminar.
Yeah, I mean...
And we read 1 book in 5 countries.
I mean, people really like it, and it's been very successful for us. And during the pandemic, we had
this project.
What's it called?
Read Me.
Read Me. Yeah. So I think our books program is called Page Turns. So I wanted it to be called Goggle Books, but they didn't go for that, unfortunately. But it does mean that book clubs, the shared experience of reading, we have in Dublin, we have a One City, One Book program as well that the libraries run. We haven't done a One Book, One Country program yet. It's something that we might try. And that's something we really want to support during the strategy. The PLR piece, I think some countries represented here will certainly pay public lending right to authors. It's the small amount of money that will go to the author when the book is borrowed from the public library. So we have a kind of action in the strategy to increase that over the course of the strategy. Because of course, without the authors, we'd be nowhere. So it's important to make sure that some money goes back to them. The second strategic objective is Libraries for All. So that has specific targets on getting more people to actively use the library. I mentioned the difference between registered and active earlier on. The opening hours piece, and there we have big national programs. We coordinate national programs here on reading and literacy and health. So we have money from the Department of Health to do a big program called Healthy Ireland at Your Library, and that means you can go into any library in the country and be guaranteed access to titles on health subjects, whether it's diet or whether it's cancer recovery, whether it's sex education. We have this national collection and that national program. The Little Library was a fantastic program where children were able to go into the library and get 2 or 3 free books and become a library member. That's the program which has been removed in today's budget, so we're absolutely gutted about that. But we've got a lot of experience, and if anyone's interested, it's a great way to get younger users registered with the library and get people reading. And the third piece there is a real new big, we say in English, big ticket item for our strategy. We're going to have a national program which is going to help people understand how to live their lives in a digital sense. So this is connected very much to what I mentioned about the banks on the high street. And we want to ensure that if you come into one of our libraries, you will be able to access training, first of all, on basic digital skills. Because even though we might like to think everybody still can use a computer just like that, it's just not the case. So we start at the basic level, then we're looking at things like financial literacy, how to engage with your banking, business information, health information, media and information literacy, which I think is an absolute core piece of modern librarianship. How do you understand the information you find online when there's misinformation everywhere? And then green literacy as well. How do you find the resources that will enable you to live a green, more sustainable lifestyle? So we're going to pull that together into a national package called Skills for Life, and that we would be basically committing to anyone that comes to our doors to be able to access that package during the course of the strategy. The second second theme is spaces, with three more strategic objectives. Spaces, it is what it says on the tin. It's about the buildings, it's about the physical spaces, and it's about getting people through our doors. It's about designing services for the community in association with the community. It's about making sure that what happens in the library is not disconnected from what happens in the local authority. So we want to be aligned with the objectives of our local economic and community plans. The whole strategy we mapped to all of the available government strategies and local government strategies we could find. And I think this is a crucial piece for us as librarians. It's no point doing our work in isolation. We need to make sure that what we're doing in our libraries is contributing to national objectives. It's only by doing that we'll be able to ensure consistent funding, recognition. Otherwise we're just out doing something and it may not be making a difference to the overall direction of the country. So the alignment's absolutely crucial. The capital programme and the standards and benchmarks are related to replenishing our library buildings, potentially building some new ones. So it's great to have that in there, and we have a commitment from government of about 30 million over 5 years. It's good, but it's not enough, so we want more. Building a library these days takes a minimum of 6 million for a relatively small one, so you can do the math there. And then we have a complete objective on sustainability and climate action. So that's making sure all of our buildings meet green standards, our vehicles and our fleets are sustainable and meet green standards. I mentioned that we're aligned to the SDGs, and we are doing a program. We want to make sure that if you go into one of our libraries, you can borrow a home energy saving kit, and you can do a kind of audit of how your home, where you can improve the heats, leaving your house outdoor and all that sort of stuff. So that came very clearly through from our consultation. The third theme is connections, and is of great relevance to here the ADELE meeting. It contains everything to do with our digital services, including the library management system. We presently provide our ebooks through a third-party commercial provider, and I would imagine that many of you are the same. I can talk all day about ebooks. Ebooks drive me mad. I hate the idea that a company is effectively providing this service, and that the publishers are telling us what we can and cannot provide in this service. It just doesn't happen in print, and it drives me insane. As I say, I can talk about it all day. But what we have promised to do in our strategy is to explore the possibility of building our own infrastructure. This isn't just some pie-in-the-sky thing. Colleagues in Finland are just about to launch their own library-owned ebook platform. Colleagues in Denmark already have one, and colleagues in Belgium are going to work with us on what ours might look like. We don't commit to actually building it because this is a big financial investment, but we commit to scoping it and understanding what the implications are. The fourth one there, the Gigabit Libraries Network, is a commitment to create a network of super fast, high-speed broadband leader libraries. There's a Gigabit Libraries Network in the United States, which is worth looking up online, and that basically is libraries that can provide access at 1 gigabit or faster to the public. So that's considerably faster than pretty much anything we're currently offering in libraries in the country. And what the Americans found is once you start offering those speeds to users, all sorts of really interesting things happen that you never expected. People are suddenly building startups in your library. People are doing really interesting things because they can get this high speed in a public building free of charge. So we're going to be doing that. I mentioned the local studies. That's the online platform for access to digital cultural heritage. And then there's more pieces on culture. Just looking at the time, the cross-border and transnational cooperation was mentioned by Paul in his speech. That's where ADELE and our EU projects live. We want to place a big emphasis here on peer learning, creating a cohort of library leaders that go across countries where Irish librarians can learn from you and your colleagues. This is really important to us, and it's something I've benefited from in my career. Librarians, and I suspect you're the same, we love to share, right? We love to steal ideas from other libraries and make them our own. And this is what we intend to be able to do here. And we'll be working also with our colleagues in Northern Ireland on a joint project in that area. Underneath the 3 strategic objectives are 3 strategic enablers. This is much more focused on the kind of under the hood piece. This is where we build the capacity of our staff. This is where we build the capacity to do that promotions and marketing I talked about. And this is where we're building things like a real-time data dashboard that will help us make decisions based on data coming out of the LMS and other data that we collect on an annual basis. We do have a National Public Libraries Open Day planned for every single year of the strategy. So that will be an invitation to the public to come in on a single day each year and join and become members of the library and see what we do. And then there in the final one is the workforce development, is the leadership. And then the final bullet is something I'm really interested in, and I think it's really related to ADELE. And it's a big existential question for us as librarians. Are we recruiting the right people? Are the right people coming into the library profession? Are we making it exciting enough for younger people who want to come into the library profession? If we don't, what are the implications? Are we looking for the right competencies? Are we looking for the right skills? And if we hire these people, are they staying? So we have a real big question to ask in that final bullet there, which is something that we think is going to take us 5 years to look at. Because I don't know about you, but if you start looking at job descriptions, competencies in a unionised environment, you have to do it in a very, very collaborative way to ensure that everybody's coming with you. But if we don't look very carefully at what we're doing about librarians of the future, library staff of the future, do they have the digital skills to provide digital services, then we have a problem. So we really intend to look at that. I think I might just leave it there because the rest I've got is quite specific, and I'm happy to go into how we plan to implement this, and I'm happy to talk about that in a one-on-one or come back to it. But what I think I've done is give you the high-level pieces of what the strategy contains, and as I say, over the next few days I'm happy to go into details because there's a lot more under the hood about exactly how we implement this. But yeah, look, is there any questions or sort of comments? We did take a couple as it went along. Yeah.
I have a question about funding.
Sure.
Since you have a national sort of 130 library,
Yep.
how are they funded? Nationally or locally?
So libraries primarily are funded at that local authority level. So that's where the money for the books will come from the IT. They'll all come from that. For the national pieces, the library management system, the online resources, we will take money in from each authority, and we, the LGMA, will engage on behalf of the sector to pay for the LMS and stuff. So that money is coming in from local authorities. And then, if you remember my diagram where I explained I can talk to any government department, our parent department will pay for things like the buildings in partnership with the local authorities, but there's a pot of money from central government. And then over the years, we have money from central government for programs like the Healthy Island programme, some reading and literacy programmes. We're just about to refresh all of the computers, the public computers in the libraries, and that will come from central government. So we're able to pick from two things, but primarily the local.